We've set this up as a podcast, so this one is recorded. The balance of the sessions aren't recorded. Balance of sessions aren't recorded, but this one is getting recorded and will hopefully appear in This Week in Coworking, won't it?
It depends how I do.
Another This Week in Coworking discussion.
Brought to you by Synchro. Connect your stack and unblock your best people.
Thank you. Hector, you've said operators should focus on outcomes rather than software. What outcome do you think the industry has been optimising for over the last decade, and is it still the right one?
Ooh, I'm going to put people in the room on defensive. Who here's guiding principle is occupancy? No one's. Fantastic. That is what we're still seeing. Everyone counting occupancy as the number one metric, as opposed to utilization, increasing revenue, reducing churn. Those are the outcomes we want to measure towards. Also, efficiency of employees. What we're seeing is people who are only looking at how much is actually booked in the space are missing half of the context.
Thank you.
So with that, and all the businesses that you're seeing globally, all the co-working businesses you're seeing globally, what are the best ones? What are the best ones stopped doing?
Another good question. I think there's this idea of measuring productivity of your staff, which is, I don't know, is that like something you guys do here in Australia? I know in the US everyone is measuring productivity as to how far do you get your to-do lists, how much do you check off your project management, things like that. And it's not a thing here? Fantastic. So that is definitely one of the things that we're seeing that is shifting, is we're moving away from sort of productivity theater into really defining roles and pathways that enable every employee to do their best work, and trying to remove the pieces that aren't their day-to-day or aren't helping them do what creates a 10x improvement for the company, and shifting that to other people or to systemized outcomes.
Hector, on a recent call that you and I had, we were talking about that not all revenue is good revenue. Can you give us an example where an operator was delighted with a revenue stream that was actually destroying value?
Does anyone sell meeting rooms online? Like to the public? Yeah, we had an operator who was full. The meeting room was continuously booked, packed. But when they were getting to the end of the month, they were actually negative. They were losing money per booking. And we had to look as to, okay, well, how is that possible? Someone using it is always better than someone not using it, but they hadn't accounted for the blended overheads. They haven't blended for the person who has to service them. They haven't blended for the fact that someone has to respond to that inquiry, rebook them, reprocess that, add them into a secondary system, give them Wi-Fi access, give them door access. All of those steps were not accounted for. And so when they actually looked for that high volume, low ticket revenue, they were actually losing money per booking over time, especially when you take into account commissions, all the other layers, the service layer, the software providing the extra services. That small tweaks actually made it profitable, but if they just left it running, that would have been a net negative on the balance sheet for years.
It's such an interesting one because, in particular, so every square metre of space we're trying to drive revenue off, and I know a number of operators are very similar. We were recently speaking with a co-living group that were using, they said to us, hey, look, you should look at storage boxes and how you can book those out and how would they work inside the space and how could you stack them, and they have really efficient ways of stacking these storage boxes. I'm interested to hear, I feel that every product really should have a cost. Like how should it serve the business? What revenue should it drive? But also, what is its cost impact to the business? But I guess, which products do you believe operators consistently underestimate outside of meeting rooms or?
I'm a big fan of virtual office. Is anyone here not selling virtual offices? All right, I'm guessing that's a legislation or AML KYC reason as to why they're not doing that. It is such a scalable business model. We're seeing operators in the UK, they're doing 100,000 virtual offices a month at around 45 to 50 pounds a month. That is a significant revenue, so much so that they no longer do co-working, and they only do this as an API to banks, to financial services, to accountants, and they've just monetized that one SKU. So it's a very, very profitable if you can get the systems right, get the AML right, get all the systems in place. It can become a very profitable and scalable revenue source. I love the day office SKU. There is so much versatility there as to how you can use it and monetize it. You can really switch onto subscription mode really, really quickly. If you get a little bit more creative, you can also use it to fill up your Mondays and your Fridays. Has everyone else got the twat problem here? I don't know if I can surround my glass.
Yes.
So if you've got that issue with everyone's coming in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you can use your day offices as a draw to bring in the people who need to be in an office on Monday at a reduced rate and create community around them. So it's a very versatile unit, and if you then turn that into a subscription, you now have a fractional office, in which case you have 3 other days to sell the office to another business. So it is a very, very potent product that not many people have fully utilized yet.
I can't agree more with the VO revenue. I mean, for us, it's been incredibly lucrative. We've seen our revenue climb. Sort of we're turning over circa $1 million a year in VO revenue climb to now $1.6 million a year. And for us, that's, there isn't a high cost to attracting those clients. Now with the KYC checks, there's obviously a cost involved with a portion of that, but it's certainly something that we're loving as a revenue stream and significantly bolsters, our bottom line. So yeah, couldn't agree more on that.
On top of that, also just any digital services, anything that you can bring in that your team loves to do. I think we're discussing as well over here, the podcast production, photography, things like that, where there's someone in your community who probably likes to do that and probably can do that, just bringing that in as a service line, but also online notary services, things that every business needs. And this is going back to my days that included building perks programs for co-working spaces. Everyone who moves into your space is going to need at least 30 core services within their first year. Look at that, have conversations with your members, and turn those into digital services, and it's highly scalable, especially if you can figure out how to do it with as few humans involved as possible. Very lucrative revenue models.
I'm just going to turn to technology so I can see your tail start wagging. But what problem does great software, co-working software, actually solve?
I believe that great software takes complexity and makes it invisible and makes it kind of feel like magic. That is what you want to ask every single vendor: is what is the magic you create in my space? And what is that aha moment that suddenly relieves my staff from having to do something that is critical to my business and is now just done in the background? So that's why I think the best use of software in our industry is. The problem is that there's 2 routes of software in our market. You either go monolithic, everything from one provider, kind of done well, almost done really well. Then you get the other side, which is very modular, and you have the best in class for every solution. You just have to figure out how you build your stack so those systems talk to each other, so you still provide that magic without having to have everything with one vendor. So that's what I believe, and it's a bit of a long form answer, but you got my tail wagging.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting, right? We implemented a census a while back, and for us, we were a group that literally were in the comms room pulling out cables. I can't tell you the stress that was involved in trying to keep the internet going. And when you're selling desks that require internet, it becomes pretty critical to the product that you're providing. I think, and there's soft benefits that you forget about with software. There's obviously the very tangible stuff that you see, but then there's the soft things that, our team wasn't going home and worrying about the fact that tomorrow morning the internet wouldn't turn on. It seems like a very basic problem to solve for, but it was something that was causing a lot of stress. And then that turns to staff retention and what does that look like, and how happy are they in their roles. So I see software being critical. I think the hardest part that we've found has been how that all integrates together, and where you should go to for those integrations and what that looks like, and what does the future look like in terms of software. So, in saying that, a lot of operators have tried to build their own platforms. I mean, we work with Hamlet to build our platform, but why do you see that most operators eventually stop building their own platforms?
Is anyone here in a software company other than you three? You're essentially real estate / hospitality. We can argue about what industry we're all in, and I'm arguing with LinkedIn currently that we're not in commercial real estate. Anyways, the real thing is there is a cycle that happens in our industry. About 11 years ago, everyone started building their own software and very quickly realized that even though they could deploy the capital expenditure to build the software, they now were a software company. They had to maintain it, they had to patch it, they had to build integrations, they had to think about all the other things that were changing around them, and that's not helping them fill desks. It's not the core competency of a co-working space or a flex office. And that was when it took a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of servers to build software. We're now in the second cycle of that, where the time from I have an idea to I have a platform is how long does it take you to write a prompt? And so we're now getting into the second cycle where folks are like, well, I can build a copy of my inventory system or my accounting system or my AML checks or my Wi-Fi management solution. I can vibe code that in a weekend. Why am I paying X money? But once again, we've solved the time it takes to deploy software, but maintaining the software and looking after it is still the biggest expense. It's still why people abandoned their own software and ended up going back to off the shelf, off the rack. And so we're seeing that as part of the second cycle now. We are seeing a lot of operators build vibe coded solutions. We are seeing, we have a growing line item at Syncaroo where people are like, we vibe coded this thing, is it secure? And I don't even have to look at it to say no. Especially when it comes to processing PII, like passwords for AML checks, being dropped into like a public Dropbox folder, terrifying stuff. And I'm like, thank goodness you got to us before you released this, because I cannot imagine what would happen if you did release it. And so we're in that cycle now where people are still, you can build software. And I don't want to discourage operators who have amazing stuff who want to vibe code. You should inspire that, you should reward that, but think about how those systems will interact with the rest of your systems without becoming liabilities or security risks, etc. So that's a long-winded answer to that question.
So let's fast forward to the future. I think there was a reference to a crystal ball before that Colliers couldn't afford, but you might be able to afford one. You vibe one.
Yeah.
So what's happening behind the scenes today that most operators won't notice until 5 years from now?
Ooh, good question. So we all know that data is gold, right? Data is the new oil. And we are all getting better at connecting the systems that have our data. What we're seeing from the operators I think are going to be leading in 5 years is they're starting to think more about how do I actually own the keys to my data? If I stop paying this vendor, do I still have access to my own data? Do I still have access to my own customer information? If I stop paying X, what happens to my business? And so we are seeing this shift, especially in boardrooms where there was a CIO or there is a CIO, really starting to think about what's called zero trust systems. In order to build a sustainable asset-based business, you have to be able to walk into the office at any time and know that one of your vendors have gone hostile. Now they won't, because all the vendors are here and they're awesome, they all love us, but you have to plan for that from a contingency perspective. And so that is one thing we're seeing discussed a lot in boardrooms. As prices are fluctuating, as prices are changing from seat-based to utilization-based pricing, these conversations are increasingly happening. And then on the flip side, once you're storing all your data, we're seeing some of the best operators start to build context graphs. And this is really this idea of how and why does your business work the way it does, and getting it out of people's heads and into some structure that can be queried, stored, shared, etc. So that is definitely the crystal ball things that I'm seeing. That is what's going to change the division between who's going to be playing catch up and who's going to be leading the market with new implementations, new tools, new products, new SKUs, because they've sorted out the foundation. That will then kick in 5 years.
Thanks.
So talking about context, which is, I mean, I've looked for a word to explain many of the things, the things that we're trying to learn about our members, and it wasn't until I started talking to you that it's referred to as context. Maybe I'm very naive, but I didn't know that the reference to it was context around, how and the way that our members are using our space. I guess there is so much data, and you can get analysis paralysis with that data, but with context, can you just touch on it a little bit more and how that applies to someone and for the operators in the room running the co-working business?
Alrighty. So does anyone have that one office that is almost impossible to sell, and you have to really finesse the deal when someone is interested in it? Does anyone have that office?
Just one.
Just the one, of course. I know, I didn't want to offend anyone, all right? Everyone has that one office. And so your sales team, your team, you know what to say when that is the office that you have to sell. When that is the office that is up for grabs, you know what you have to say. But that is not stored anywhere. Think about, like, if you brought in a new employee, a new salesperson tomorrow, they would have to just follow that one of your team around to absorb that information. And so that is one level of context. It's like, how do you store the institutional knowledge that is happening and the decisions that are being made? Another one is, we decided to give that one customer a discount we haven't given to any other customer before. But we agreed to it by the water cooler while they were on the phone, and we just gave the deal. But we didn't store why we made that deal. We didn't create a point of data as to why we made that specific move. So when it comes to renewal, we don't know that. If the person who made that deal isn't there anymore, or they're distracted, or they're on holiday, or et cetera, you don't have that context. And so that is another point. And then it gets down to, like, the actual members. Your members are telling you so much about what makes them delighted to be in your space, and that lives in your best community manager's heads. But if they're having a bad day, if they stepped in a puddle on the way to work, if they are having any other distraction and they miss that moment to delight your customer, you haven't got a mechanism in place to nudge another community manager to step in and to create that moment of delight on that 200th visit, or on that celebrity, like this, you've been in our space for like 3 years, right? These are slight, tiny moments that create human connection, and AI can enable that if you give it context. But we do not capture context in our industry. 0.1% of our entire industry is currently capturing context on a day-to-day basis.
Sorry, can I just, with the context, where would you record it? In your CRM? Is that where you're thinking you note down these things? Is it an Excel spreadsheet that you're then pumping into Claude that's then giving you, what's the recommendation around that?
Great question. It comes down to where you are in your data strategy. If you are using a CRM, and that's where you're storing information, that's definitely the first place to put it. But if you're already down the data strategy pipe, where now you're starting to store your data somewhere else, in a data warehouse that you own, or in markdown files, whatever it is you're storing, you would store that adjacent to, you store the context data adjacent to your normal data. So a lot of the times we work with operating and we're like, you can store it in HubSpot, but if HubSpot starts charging you every time you make an inquiry about your users, then servicing your users becomes more and more expensive. So you should always, once again, have a zero trust plan that you're storing a version of this context, a profile.md file, a markdown file, somewhere in your file structure that is shared with your team that can be accessed by any of them. I'm not saying make it publicly accessible, absolutely do not do that. What I'm saying is have it in a way. So for example, at our company, we are a very lean company. We work with teams in Australia, we work with teams all around the world. There's a lot that our team has to know about every single conversation we have with our customers and our partners, but we all use different scaffolding. I use Codex, my co-founders use Claude, our devs use Cursor. However, we created a file structure in that index that has all of our conversations and context around what we're working on that we can all point our LLMs to all start from the same point in our customer's history. And so what that means is by sharing a single file base, it doesn't matter if the price of OpenAI skyrockets, we can shift to Claude tomorrow. If Apple releases an LLM that can run on your machine, we can shift to that. We don't no longer pay for compute. So it all comes down to having it in the place that makes the most sense for you today, but then planning for what is your idea for AI 3 years from now. So you want to store it in HubSpot right now, but you also want to be backing it up to whatever you're going to be using 3 years from now, depending on your AI strategy.
So if you were to start a co-working business tomorrow in one location, I was actually going to frame that differently. What systems would you deliberately avoid?
Ooh. Systems. I don't know. I think I would avoid mixed systems. Like systems where, I think what we were discussing as well earlier this morning, is having systems that overlap or over functions. So I would want my sales team to only be using a CRM. I would want my operations team to only be using an operations system, and I want my janitorial team, my services team, etc., my building management team to have something that they understand and that is popular in that sector of the industry, because then I can hire the best salespeople in the world, and they don't have to know how Office R&D, RDQ, any of these things work. Because once they process a deal to a certain point in the pipeline, I trust in that the system we would implement would update the people who need to know next with the same level of quality data or data, and then they can just use their platform. So everything becomes an interface to the same data set. And so I wouldn't avoid systems per se. I would look at system architecture and orchestration as opposed to which specific system. Now, once you have that orchestration layer, that's when you can pick what is your best, the best community managers you want to hire, what are they used to using? You can use that instead of having to retrain them, retool them. On the flip side, yeah, I would definitely look a little bit more at kind of your door access, things that are usage-based pricing. Try to find things that are flat fee-based on the number of fixed assets, i.e. doors, as opposed to how many people are going to walk through those doors. This is one of the things that keep tripping up operators when it comes to like, we're growing, but we're losing money because we're now being charged for every single member we have. Whereas if you can, spread that cost over, that's definitely how I would approach the stack side of it.
Yeah. So let's move to Australia or the Australian perspective. I'll test your knowledge here. How many kangaroos? No, I'm joking.
Three.
That's Sophie's questions from this morning. So you've said Australia is innovating more than it realises. What are Australian operators doing that the rest of the world should be paying attention to?
I can tell you what people are interested in based on what they're clicking on the newsletter. People are fascinated by your SKUs here, your partnership deals that you're making. They are fascinated with your expansion links. Whenever we announce an Australian brand has expanded, it always draws in great clicks. Another element that's very, very interesting, I don't know if the Shed Space and the Rubber Desk guys are here, data from Australia and New Zealand is very, very popular outside of Australia. But what's very, very interesting is it's not only what I'm seeing in the clicks, it's when I speak to executives and I'm like, okay, where do you look for inspiration? They're asking what's happening in APAC. They're asking what is the operators in Australia doing, given your relationship with landlords here, you have a slightly different capital structure. Obviously, public REITs is very, very popular in the US. The amount of questions I get from REITs or real estate investment trusts, I think that's what they're called, in the US, who are like, tell us what Watso's doing. I'm like, go speak to Watso. But yeah, so they're looking at what you guys are doing a lot more than they say so. And so just on that note, tell your stories more. I know this is coming from a guy who's now in America, and it sounds very American for me to say that, but you guys are doing tremendous work. And at the newsletter, I can only share what is public. So if you do not share what your learnings are, why you made specific decisions, what you learned at conferences like this, I cannot then go and share them and help you get the credibility that you want, because they just look at it as aggregated data. But you have great leaders in the room, you have great leaders in your industry, you have great leaders in your team. Build them up, build their personal brands, because I cannot wait for more US conferences to invite all of you to come over there and teach us in person and answer the questions directly, because I cannot share your secrets. I can only share what you share publicly. And so if you're in the room, they can ask you directly.
So you've told us we're all amazing, but we just need to share more. What is one thing that you think Australian operators should stop copying from overseas? If you're seeing something that we're copying, is there something we should stop doing?
And I love the WeWork team, but don't buy a wave pool. Definitely do not do that. Like seriously, we have a lot. This is going to come as a surprise to all of you. We have a lot of hype in America. And so we will always talk about this great innovation, this great vibe coding solution we did, this AI system we implemented. Don't believe everything they're sharing as like what you need to do. investigate the vendors that they're talking about, figure out if it makes sense for your model, your products, your solutions, but don't just follow blindly, because we are very experimental in the United States. We will run 5 different AI agents at the same time and then figure out that they're arguing with each other and then get really confused by that. But then we're telling the market that, hey, we have 5 AI agents and we're awesome. So yeah, don't believe the hype is the one thing I would say.
So last question, fast forward 6 years, what jobs inside co-working disappear, which become more important, and what will the best operators spend their time doing instead, besides making money?
That would be good.
Yeah.
So I think the ones that are the new roles that I think are come in are basically some sort of data governance role. There will be someone who's responsible for knowing where your data lives and how it lives and making sure that it's orchestrated internally. I had an argument about this morning. I think you're going to have data rooms pop back into your spaces. So some sort of internal IT is going to be something that, if I'm right on that assumption, and there is going to be internally hosted AI in your spaces, then you're going to need someone to look after those machines. And so that's definitely, I think, a new role that's going to pop back into co-working. Roles that are going to disappear, I think, are people dedicated purely to retention or renewals. I know a lot of folks, they have a separate, in America we have separate sales teams. We have inbound and new leads, and then we have the retention teams. I think the retention teams are going to just be merged into the community managers, because they'll have enough roles, enough data and context, and enough sales skills to be able to facilitate that extension or that renewal or that cross-sell, upsell, downsell in a human way, assisted by AI. So that's definitely a role I think is going to shift drastically. Yeah, I think that's off the top of my head.
Thank you very much for your time today, Hector. Any questions? Adam.
Hector, from the AI side, there's a lot on the operator side that we're seeing. What about from the member side? So what are they going to see from us on the AI side, and what do they want?
Great question. So the question is, we talk about the operator side, what about the member side? Like, how do they interact with you in your spaces? Over the next 6 weeks, every inventory system in our industry will release some sort of help desk support AI agent, some sort of set up my IT Wi-Fi type agent, some sort of sales-based agent. This is going to come to every single platform, and I will take bets if I'm wrong on that. But over the next 6 weeks, for sure.
You know.
Yeah, I know.
Guys, cancel that.
And so you're going to have that. The problem with that as well is which system interacts with your customer, right? Going back to what I was saying a little bit earlier about this modular stack, is it your HubSpot agent who speaks to them, or is it your Office R&D agent? Is it your outbound sales agent? Is it passing it through to the right person in your team? Great. But then once they're a member, does it get handed over to another agent? Is it a sub-agent? So there is this very weird thing that's happening right now in the agentification of the member side. And it's a bit of a mess, if I'm honest. That's why I focus so much on the operator side. If your operating team is as efficient as they can be, and they have the best that they can possibly have every day, they're going to figure out how to improve the member experience. And you hire great people, so they will figure that out. And that's why I'm more focused on giving them the freedom to break away from their screens and break away from those to-do lists and Excel sheets that are sticking together your systems right now, so that they can get out and figure out what they need to implement in the right way to improve the processes, but also improve the user experience.
Anyone else? Cass.
You spoke very early on with regards to occupancy versus engagement in spaces. Can you just give a bit more detail on why that's so significant and how that impacts on the future of Flex?
Absolutely. I am someone who has pissed off a lot of people by saying that co-working and flex spaces is a subscription business more than a hospitality business. And the number one thing with subscription businesses is you have to measure how much someone is using your subscription to be able to measure what's the likelihood of them churning or canceling. And so if someone has booked an office for 5 people and only one person is coming in 1 time a week, that should be a red flag to your operations team, your engagement team. How can you get them to utilize the office more before it comes to that point of renegotiation or renewal, so that you don't have that churn risk. Or you have enough demand for that office, it's better for you to downsell them to a lower location, low office, or low smaller supply with more meeting room credits, for example, because you know they're not using it, so that you can bring in another office that's going to be more full, create more community atmosphere, etc. And it goes back to like the whole Monday and Friday thing. If you know people are not coming into the office on Monday and Friday, but there are specific teams that are investigating why they're coming into the office on Monday and Friday and trying to build community around them. Maybe they are doing certain academic things. They have to do reports at the end of the day on a Monday. Are there other people in your market who could also use your offices on Monday? You can give a subsidized pricing to get them in. But that's thinking about utilization, not occupancy, not capacity. And so that it's just a mind shift we have to really think about is if someone's not using the gym membership, and it's a terrible analogy, eventually they're going to want to quit. Now you have two options. You can either say it's make it impossible to quit, other American gyms, or you can figure out a way to give them a better product for what their outcome is and what they actually want from your space, and then retain them and nurture them until they're ready to step back into a bigger role.
Just somewhat on that point, as far as that then intersects with dynamic pricing, have you got a view on, finally, I think the industry's all orientated in the right direction in my view, but are we over-engineering it and trying to be like an airline that I want to be in Melbourne tomorrow, I'll pay whatever it takes, where if I need a day office, the variable pricing structure matters a little bit, but not as much as, say, the other comparative industries?
It's a great question, and it's one I just released a deep dive into dynamic pricing 2 weeks ago. It's on the top of thisweekincoworking.com, and it's free, so go click on that, in which case I do just explore this. The TLDR, so I'm going to read, is there is a balance about what technology can do and what you should do. That is the number one judgment call that you as an operator need to figure out. And on the flip side, there is yield optimization and hospitality. Every operator is going to have a different point on that first bridge and a different way to balance that scale. That is what is going to decide whether dynamic pricing or what form of dynamic pricing, because what I've really discovered in the deep dive is that dynamic pricing is not a new invention. Everyone has changed the pricing of their office based on whether it's an exterior or an interior. They changed it based on demand, it's just on how long it's been empty. So dynamic pricing is not new to our industry. What is new to our industry is the technology and the AI that enables decisions to be made faster and more rapidly and better informed on bigger sets of data. And so it's not about if you are going to implement dynamic pricing, it's at what level do you feel comfortable using it? Do you want to let people think about when they're making a booking? I could probably do this next week. That's not that urgent. Or do you want them just to book it and use your space? It goes back to the occupancy, goes to utilization. If dynamic pricing is skewing away from utilization, you have a problem.
Thank you very much, Hector. Appreciate it.
Thank you.